I want you to think about the last time you sat down with a book and didn't think once about what you were going to say about it online. No review forming in your head, no rating out of 5, no caption, no, this would make a great photo, just the book. Now, I've been making book content and writing blogs and newsletters about books and reading culture for years. And the question I get most isn't what should I read? Lately, it's why does reading feel like work now? Now, I've been trying to remember when I stopped doing that. And I think it was around the same moment I downloaded a reading tracker app. You know what I'm talking about, Goodreads. And not because Goodreads is evil, it's not, although maybe it is. Listen, we can have a whole Goodreads conversation separately. But the second I started logging books online, I started counting them. And the second I started counting them, I noticed something shifted. Reading stopped being this quiet, private thing I did for myself, and it became something I was performing, even if the only audience was simply the progress bar. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way, because lately, everywhere I look, readers are saying the same thing. I love books, so why does reading feel so exhausting? And I think I know what happened. So let me be clear about something right away. This is not a video about how people don't read anymore. I think that's a different conversation. And honestly, I think people read. More people want to read than maybe ever before. I mean, look at the wait list at libraries. They're long. Independent bookstores are opening everywhere. They're not just closing anymore. And online, reading is one of the biggest content categories on the internet right now. And no, let's not compare it to some other niche like fashion and beauty and pop culture. No, let's just be so for real. I think the desire is there. I think the love is there. But something else is there too. And this low-grade pressure that a lot of readers feel but haven't quite named. Now, this sense that reading, just sitting quietly with a story, there's a sense that it isn't enough anymore. That you also need to track it, you need to rate it, we need to discuss it, you need to display it, you need to keep pace with it. And that pressure didn't come from nowhere. So let's talk about where did it actually come from? And there is a version of this story that has BookTok involved, but that's not actually where it started for me. I think Goodreads was the quiet beginning. Now, Goodreads launched back, I think, in the early 2000s, maybe 2006, 2007. And for a while, it was just genuinely a great place to keep track of what you read. So think of it like your digital bookshelf, pretty simple. But Goodreads introduced some things that seemed small, but of course, over time, they ended up being enormous. And one of the things, the Goodreads reading challenge, set a goal, track your progress, and just watch the bar fill up. And let me just, stick a pin. Let's have a sidebar here. Goodreads has been antiquated for a long time, but something readers have been asking for more and more and more is analytics. They love the stats, they love the spreadsheets, they love the bars. These are things that they love to share online. But anyway, let's go back to the Goodreads goals, because there's something I want to make very clear. There is nothing wrong with goals. However, when you give readers a number to hit and something to hit publicly, some people start choosing shorter books or skipping books that they're not so sure about, or they start feeling guilty in November when they're super behind. So I think the reading challenge reframed reading from what do I want to read to more of am I reading enough? And I think those are two very different questions. And then, of course, we also have to talk about the star rating, 5 stars for every book. And suddenly you're not just reading, you're evaluating, you're judging everything. We're all critics. And I love that to some degree. But you finish the last page and instead of really sitting with it, some people are already deciding was this a 4-star? Was this 4.5? Was this 5? Also, and let's stick another pin. Another debate was about Goodreads needing half stars, because people want to be so particular. And going back to Goodreads, because that was the first app for me, I'm not sure if they didn't mean to do this, but it did build the infrastructure for reading to become super measurable. And I think once something is measurable, it's also easy to be optimized. And once it's optimized, it starts to feel like a performance, like even when no one is asking you to perform. So I think it's important to pause and really think about what has Goodreads become? Because Goodreads can make careers, but it can also break careers long before the book has even gone on sale. So one element is Goodreads, and that was the beginning for me. But then there's also BookTube. And I say this with love because I'm literally uploading this to YouTube right now, aka the BookTube community. And BookTube was one of the first places where I feel reading became really social content. You know, we got social, we got to know people, we got to love people, we followed people, we've seen their lives evolve right in front of us. We also saw book hauls, you know, monthly wrap-ups, shelf tours, reading vlogs. And I think BookTube did something really beautiful. It made reading feel communal. You know, again, you could watch someone talk about a book or have a conversation like I am here. And when it's something you love, you really feel that spark of recognition. Same thing if you didn't like it too. You feel that less alone. You know, it really matters. Like, yes, you know, reading is this real thing and we're doing it together. But again, I think it's worth talking about that BookTube also created formats, you know, the haul format, the ranking format, the I read a book a day for a week format. I read for 24 hours straight, 72 hours. And formats by nature reward volume. They reward opinion over reflection, like, you know, those hot takes and ranting. And, you know, nobody's filming a video, you know, like I've read a few pages and I'm not sure how I feel yet. You know, that's not thumbnail worthy. That's not clickbait worthy. But that is what reading actually feels like for some people some of the time. Sometimes it's just a chapter, a few pages, you know. Sometimes it's one page. After all. So I think formats really created a space where if you didn't fit that mold, then you weren't going to create that community that other people have created. And again, it created that measuring stick, you know, of if I don't do this, then I won't fit in. So BookTube was a really great place for community. I still think it's one of the only places on internet where you do have that loyal group of people who, once they connect with you, they really connect with you. But the rabbit hole I really went down, like deep, I went deep down this rabbit hole. That was Bookstagram, okay? Instagram, but the book community, Bookstagram, because I felt that brought something new as well. So where I was kind of harping on BookTube for having certain formats, I think Bookstagram really made reading aesthetic. It made reading beautiful. It was all about the flat lays, the shelfies, you know, the color coordinated shelves, the reading nooks, the fairy lights. And yes, BookTube did this too, but I don't know how to explain it. There was something different about Instagram. You know, again, flat lays, flowers, coffee, just beautiful settings. And yes, YouTube is aesthetic too, but Instagram did it differently. If you know, you know. Just let me know in the comments that I'm not alone in thinking that Bookstagram really upped the ante. And let's be clear, beautiful things aren't bad. I love something that is visually, aesthetically pleasing. I like a good shelfie. Most of us do. Some of you all comment on my shelves and say you love them and you want me to do a shelf tour one of these days. I get it. But I think, again, Bookstagram added that visual layer to reading that really raised the bar, because it wasn't about what you read anymore, where I kind of felt like BookTube had those discussions, but it was more about how your reading life looked. And for a lot of people, that was peak performance of reading. And that's when it really started to feel just as important as reading itself. And then let us talk about the beast that really upended everything. It upended Goodreads culture, it upended BookTube culture, and it upended Bookstagram culture. And that is BookTok. BookTok happened, and BookTok, I feel, changed everything. And I'm not being dramatic when I say it changed everything, because it genuinely did. BookTok did something no other platform did before, and it sold books like nothing before. Again, not like BookTube, not like Bookstagram. BookTok moved insane units, okay? Titles that have been out for years suddenly became bestsellers again because one video went viral. And we realized publishers started paying attention in a way they hadn't before. I mean, even Barnes & Noble built an entire BookTok table and shelf in their stores, And that's really wild when you kind of think about it. And I remember there was this article, I'm probably going to have to search for it and maybe insert something here, where the New York Times did this interview about BookTok creators, and they were making bank, like 5 figures for a post and a short run campaign. And again, it did something none of the other platforms did, and also BookTok brought so many new people to the book community, to reading. People who haven't picked up a book since high school maybe, or uni or something. They were suddenly excited about stories again because someone on TikTok made it feel fun and they made it feel accessible. And that is a gift. I also don't want to minimize that for even a second because that was huge. But BookTok also accelerated how we talk about books. Because again, that format over there rewarded intensity, quick takes like this book destroyed me, 5 stars, no notes, I'm never recovering from this. It was just very emotionally connected. It was like an emotional shorthand language that became a whole vibe, and the algorithm rewarded it. Let's be clear. The more extreme, the more reactionary, the more widespread, emotionally driven, it meant that it would reach a wide audience. And then the conversation itself about books, I feel, and listen, this might be my algorithm, but it started to kind of move away from nuance and more towards performance. However, and let's stick a pin here because this is something I do believe very passionately. If your algorithm is giving you too much of one thing, you can really start to curate your algorithm to get other kinds of content. And I did. I found so many amazing content creators that provided depth and provided nuance. However, these content creators weren't as mainstream as the others. So I want to be clear. These content creators, they do exist. However, they're not the ones everyone kind of knows about. There might be a few there, but in the beginning, I felt it was more the emotionally driven content creators that were at the front of the line. And again, I don't want to say like some people are good and some people are bad because the people are wonderful, okay? I think the communities that have been built, both from the content creator point of view, but also just me as a consumer, but also as a content creator, hello, I know it, but I also do consume this content and the people are amazing because when you find your people, you find your people. I think where the problem lies, because the people are great, it's the systems, it's the algorithms, it's the metrics, again, it's the formats. Because again, they reward a very specific kind of engagement. I experience it here on YouTube. It's the same thing when I'm on Instagram because I do spend a lot of time there. And that kind of engagement doesn't look much like the quiet, messy, uncertain experiences of actually reading a book and what we go through in real life. Again, everything overall is just a performance. So here's where we are now. Across all of these platforms, I feel every platform is telling you something different, but I'm also going to tell you where I land on this all. So first, Goodreads is telling you how many books you've read this year and how far behind you are, okay? And rating everything by stars. BookTube and Bookstagram reward readers who read the most, the fastest, but also those who have the most beautiful setups. And then BookTok was turning every book into either like a 5-star masterpiece or a complete dumpster fire, full on disappointment. And across all of these platforms, there's this hum that says, reading is something to keep up with. And I think that's why readers are feeling pressure. That's why creators are feeling pressure. because shelves become curated displays, stars again are verdicts, reading challenges feel like obligations, and if you don't finish, you're a failure. TBR piles become sources of anxiety instead of people having genuine excitement. And then here's the thing no one is also saying out loud. A lot of readers are starting to choose books based on what would perform well online. So from what's trending, what would get engagement, what would make a good talking point, rather than what they actually wanted to read. And some of them didn't even notice they were doing it. And I don't think that's a moral failing, again. But that's just what happens when you put a deeply personal activity inside a system that is built to measure external engagement. You know, the system ends up reshaping the behavior. I think it always does. So unless you're checking yourself multiple times, it will happen. Because even I've fallen in the trap where I've wanted to talk about certain things, but I'm like, no one's interested in this, or no one's going to watch this. And this is what the YouTube algorithm rewards. Like, no one is going to care about my thoughts and my opinions and my deep dives, or, you know, just something unknown, because they're not going to click on it because they don't recognize this, and also they don't know me. Like, I'm relatively unknown. So I think this is also where we need to talk about the differences between reading on the internet and reading in the rest of your life, because for me, completely different things. So if you're in a book club, like a real life book club, the kind that meets at somebody's home, you know, at the kitchen table at the island, or the library once a month, because I used to do that, nobody's asking you how many books you've read this year. Like, no one is asking for a star rating. I mean, some people might, but, you know, no one really cares what your shelf looks like. You just show up, you have a discussion. You probably have snacks, you know, little drinks. You also talk about life in the in-between. And the focus is really just about like, hey, did you love it? Did you not like it? Did you finish? Did you land somewhere in the middle? Are you still working out how you actually feel? And yes, you do have that person who shows up to book club who didn't read the book either, but they're also great fun to have around as well. And I think all of that is fine. I think all of that is the whole point. It's also when you kind of think back to what reading was like in the classroom, because when you read something for a class, the conversation was more about ideas, you know, what did the author mean? What did you notice? What confused you? I felt like you were engaging with the text together in real time. Hopefully, if you had a good teacher, there was no pressure to kind of turn it into anything else. Of course, in the modern sense, turn it into content. So reading online, I feel, doesn't feel like any of those, not the classroom, not book club. It feels faster, it feels louder, it feels more certain, like you're expected to have a take, a very clear take. It needs to be quick as well. And that take gets measured in likes and comments and shares and views. And the ambiguity and slowness that I think makes reading feel more meaningful, it kind of gets quietly squeezed out as well. But here's where I need to say something I really mean, because I don't want anyone to walk away from this video thinking like I'm standing outside of the book community and I'm throwing rocks. Like, I'm not, clearly. I'm inside it. I live here. I love it here, quite frankly. I love reading online. I think the online reading community is one of the most thoughtful, generous, passionate communities on the internet, okay? Full stop. Once you find your people, you find your people. And I genuinely believe that there are more good people online than, you know, loud and a tad bit rude ones. I've also met people through talking about books online who have changed how I think, not just about books, but about life. And people who recommend something, not just because it's trending, but because they genuinely think that you specifically would connect with it. Sometimes they challenge you and they're like, I think you should read this, you know, I think it will change your point of view of this other book that you've talked about. I also love the people who disagree with you about a book as well. And they somehow make you smarter for it, because it gives you a moment to pause. And again, we don't like rude people. We like people who criticize the work, you know, not the individual, not the author, but also not the creator as well. You know, bless the people who leave a comment. Again, that's just really thoughtful than so many reviews that people kind of latch onto and they're talking about. So the discussions I've had in comment sections and replies to my emails, because to be quite frank, and that's another thing, as a person who's been writing a newsletter for years, I have more people who hit reply to that email to me directly. Also the people who show up in DMs, because again, people are so concerned, and rightfully so, about leaving something publicly, because then it's up for scrutiny, and then there are people who take it the wrong way, and it just creates this snowball effect that people want nothing to do with. They just want to share their opinion and feel safe, if that makes sense. So sometimes I disagree and I'm like, well, I hear you, but listen, I disagree completely. Or sometimes they hear me and their reply back is like, I don't know what you're talking about because this is how I felt. So I think discussions are important. I think we just, need to be a bit more mindful sometimes. But again, the discussions I've had online are the best discussions I've ever been a part of. Better than any classroom I've sat in, better than any in-person book club, because obviously it's volume, I'm hearing from a wider range of people. And I think it's because the people choose to be there. They choose to reply. They choose to show up. Because again, they care about the stories. They care about the ideas. And they also care about each other. And I think that's worth saying out loud, because that is the thing I never want to lose. It's the conversations, because again, this is a reality. Reading is solitary. It is. I'm alone when I'm reading the book, and so are you. That's the nature of it. But we're also human beings, and we're social by nature, and we want to share the things that move us. So when we finish a book, we want to turn to someone and say, like, did you feel that too? And I think that instinct isn't the problem. I think that instinct is beautiful. Again, that's why book clubs exist. That's why this community online exists. That's why I make videos, quite frankly. So the problem isn't wanting to talk about the books. I think the problem is when the talking starts to reshape the reading. When you're mid-chapter and you're already composing the review in your head. When you choose a book because it will make good content instead of because that book called to you or someone recommended it to you that you know, like, and trust. So when the social layer starts to sit on top of the solitary experience and slowly flattens it, I think it's a bit sad. And I think the honest truth is that's easier to name than it is to fix. Because once you're someone who reads publicly on the internet, okay, I do, the pull is always there. The metrics are always visible. The temptation to perform is baked into every platform we use. I see it, I feel it. But I also think we can hold both things, the community and the quiet and the sharing and the solitude. We just have to be super intentional about it. And we have to try not to lose the thing that brought us here all in the first place, which is the love of books, the love of story, and the love of people we get to talk to them about with. So that is something I'm trying to keep front of mind. I'm saying this out loud, not just to you. I don't want to be preachy. I'm also kind of giving myself this personal reminder too. So let me tell you what I've been doing, because again, I don't want to just talk about this in the abstract. I want to be honest about what this has been looking like for me in practice. So I have started reading some books that I have no intention of talking about them online, like ever. Books that are just for me, I don't log them publicly anywhere. I'm not writing reviews. I'm not posting about them. I mean, I might mention them in my personal journal, but again, it's private. Nobody sees it. I'm not flagging quotable sentences in a book all the time. I'm not building a take while I'm still in the middle of the story or even immediately at the end. I just want to live with the book for a while. And that for me feels different. It feels like how reading used to feel before all of this. YouTube is relatively new for me, but I've been doing the blog. I've been doing the newsletter for a really long time and the social media as well. So I've stopped rating books in the immediate moment. I finish them. I used to do this automatically, like close the book cover, open the app, and get into it while I was kind of also still sitting with it. Now I wait a week, I wait sometimes longer. I also have this rule, by the way, with my seasonal reading guides that I have to sit with all the books for like a month before I make that final decision about who's there and who's not. So again, sometimes I wait a super long time. Sometimes I don't rate it at all, because I've realized that not every book needs a number. Some books just need to sit with you for a while. So I've been doing more of that. I've also stopped treating my TBR like a to-do list. Like, I used to feel this genuine anxiety about looking at the pile of unread books on my shelf, like their task I have to accomplish. Now instead, I've really been looking at that pile and think that, you know what, those are future possibilities. Those are all possibilities I can get to when I get to them. Or maybe I won't. Maybe they end up in the donation pile, and that's okay, because maybe that's the book that someone else needs. I've also been a huge rereading proponent. I also have stopped announcing it. I used to feel like rereading wasn't productive or it didn't count towards reading because, again, look, if I'm going to spend a time with book, it should be a new one. There's also that guilt sometimes, but I like revisiting books that I know and love. I want them to be like my friends. You know how you have some friends that you kind of know surface level, and that's okay. But then there's some friends that you really want to know. That's how I feel about certain books. So it doesn't always have to be a new one. It doesn't always have to be something I need to review or something that is counting towards a goal. I love picking up those old favorites just because I want to. And I've stopped announcing it because I used to announce it a lot on social. So now I'll just reread my passages by myself, minding my business, because I want to feel them again. That's just for me. I've also given myself permission to abandon books without guilt. Now, before reading on the internet, full transparency, I never DNF'd. I never did. This is where the internet was a positive, influence. That's the word. The internet was a positive influence on me because there were a lot of people who made it okay to DNF. They were like, listen, don't torture yourself. You're not in school anymore. And I think as a completist, as a person who wants to finish everything I've started, I had that guilt. So see, the internet helped me abandon those books without guilt that weren't working for me, because not every book is for you. And I don't always need to know. So I've stopped pushing through things that I wasn't connecting with just because I felt like I had to finish it so I could have an opinion. That's the other layer. So I just set it down quietly. Again, no dramatic DNF posts, no rating. Again, I just move on. And honestly, after doing all of this for some time, I realized I've started paying attention to how I feel after I read and not just focusing on what I think and needing an opinion quick. Because I think reading isn't only an intellectual exercise. Sometimes a book just makes you feel calm or unsettled or nostalgic or brave. And again, I think feeling is the point. It doesn't have to be translated into a star rating or a review or a piece of content to actually be real. So if you're feeling burnt out, I think a lot of people have been feeling this way because, again, it shows up in the comments, in bookish spaces, in little moments where reading starts to feel like a job. I want you to hear me say this very clearly. You haven't fallen out of love with books. You've just been swimming in a culture that turned reading into something to optimize. And that is what is exhausting. Because of course it is. But books itself are still the same quiet refuge that they've always been. The stories haven't changed. The pages haven't changed. The feeling of disappearing into something beautiful hasn't gone anywhere. And look, this isn't a eulogy. I just realized this isn't a eulogy for reading culture. The culture is alive and full of people I'm so grateful to have met, and I'm very excited to meet new people. I think this is just a recalibration. Maybe the way back into reading that is the simplest one. A few pages, a comfortable spot, no expectations, no audience, no stars, just you and a story. And that in itself has always been enough. So listen, I'm going to wrap this up. If any of this has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Not a take, not a debate. Just tell me in the comments, when was the last time that you read something with absolutely no pressure? What were you reading? I want to know. And if you want more conversations like this, more on reading culture, I'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. I want to continue having them in between talking about the books I'm reading too. Now, if you haven't already, now's a great time to like the channel, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, but also hit the notification bell so you're the first to know what's new when I go live and when new videos are uploaded. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.